Before we begin, please take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel for more breaking news and courtroom coverage. Your support helps us continue to bring you these important stories as they unfold. Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press. Nobody expected Justin Bieber. The room was tense, eyes focused on the prosecution's next scheduled witness until the back doors opened and in walked Justin Bieber. Gasps echoed. Even the judge froze. No announcement, no pre-written statement. Just Justin stepping forward on his own. Until that moment, he had stayed silent as his name swirled through headlines, court leaks, and whispered connections to the early days of his career, but something had changed. Maybe it was the mounting testimony from other victims. Maybe it was the betrayal from people he once trusted in the industry. Maybe it was seeing the courage of others who had already come forward. Whatever it was, Justin was done hiding. He wasn't there as a celebrity. He was there as a young man who had carried secrets from his teenage years for far too long, and when he began to speak, the courtroom wasn't prepared for what they would hear. Because what Justin revealed about Diddy, the parties, the pressure, and the manipulation of a 15-year-old boy wasn't just explosive, it was a warning. It started like any other day of the Diddy trial. The room buzzed with low conversations, the press hunched in their designated rows, and lawyers whispered strategies as they waited for the prosecution's scheduled expert witness. But when the side doors opened and Justin Bieber stepped into the courtroom alone, no entourage, no legal team, no announcement, the room changed. You could hear a pin drop. Some people thought it was a mistake. Others thought it was a publicity stunt, but the way Justin walked, tentative yet determined, with none of his usual stage confidence, told everyone this was deeply real. The judge raised an eyebrow, and Diddy, who'd been casually reviewing documents with his attorneys, suddenly froze, his pen suspended mid-air, his eyes widening with unmistakable panic. In that moment, something in the power dynamic visibly shifted. Justin walked straight to the witness stand. No eye contact with anyone. He didn't even glance at Diddy. "I wasn't on the witness list," Justin began, his voice surprisingly steady. "I asked to speak after watching the courage of others." The judge allowed it. And from that moment on, the entire trial shifted, because what Justin was about to say wasn't part of any media narrative. It wasn't a social media leak. It was something that had haunted him since he was a child, thrust into an adult world at 15. "I've kept a lot inside for a long time," he said. "I've made albums. I've won awards. I've performed for millions. But none of that can erase what happened when I was just a kid trying to make it in this industry. And who made it happen?" He turned just slightly toward Diddy. "You did." Justin told the courtroom that it started, like many music industry stories do, with an introduction. It came through Usher, who had taken the young Canadian under his wing. The way they framed it, it was supposed to be a networking opportunity, a chance to meet the right people, to secure his future in the industry. Nothing inappropriate, just connections, introductions, a place where a talented teenager could get noticed by the right people. He'd been to industry events before, but this was different. But the moment Justin arrived, he knew something was off. It was at a massive mansion in Los Angeles. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Security personnel checked IDs at the door, but waved the 15-year-old through with a nod from someone inside. The second he stepped inside, his phone was taken. That should have been the first red flag. They said it was for privacy, to protect the high-profile guests. But it felt like something else. like they didn't want evidence leaving that house. He was ushered inside. The lights were dim, the music too loud to allow for normal conversation, forcing people into close proximity to communicate. There were mirrors on many of the walls. It felt like someone was always watching. Justin said that after being introduced to several industry executives, Diddy approached him directly. He said something like, "The future of music, right here. We're going to take good care of you." And he smiled. That smile. It wasn't warmth. It was assessment. Justin said he followed Diddy into a more private area of the house, thinking they were going to discuss music and his potential career path. Instead, what he saw confused and disturbed his 15-year-old mind. There were people in various states of intoxication. Some he recognized from the music industry. Some looked young, though older than him. There were others watching, laughing, filming with small cameras. And Diddy? He was orchestrating it all, like it was the most normal thing in the world. He paused, swallowing hard. "I didn't know how to leave. I was 15. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have my own car. And that was the point. Once you're in, Justin continued, his voice steady but hollow. A few days after the party, he got a call. From Diddy personally. All he said was, "You're going to be huge, kid. We're going to make sure of it." Then he hung up. He thought. It was just excitement about his talent until a message arrived on his computer. It was unmarked. Inside was a video file. I almost didn't open it, but I did. It was footage from that night of me sitting on a couch, clearly uncomfortable, surrounded by adults doing things I didn't understand at the time. I don't remember anyone filming me, but there I was. There was a voice behind the camera, Diddy's voice saying, "That's how we start them young." Justin testified that the confusion and fear he felt in that moment was overwhelming for a 15-year-old. I realized I wasn't invited to that party as just a talented kid. I was being initiated. He said that's when the grooming began. I'd get invites to more events. My management would accept without even asking me. Then, suddenly, my career started. Taking off. My songs got played everywhere. My videos got the best directors. People I dreamed of working with were suddenly available. I was a kid, so I thought it was all because of my talent. I didn't understand the cost. And so for years, Justin said nothing. He smiled through interviews, pushed aside growing discomfort, focused on the music. But every time I saw a young artist come up, I wondered if they were going through what I did. I wondered if anyone was protecting them when no one protected me. He looked around the courtroom. Diddy didn't just make careers. He created dependence in people too young to understand what was happening. And that, Justin said, was what finally brought me here today. Justin paused, glanced at the jury, and leaned closer to the mic. It wasn't just one video. That was the beginning. He said from that moment on, everything he did felt like it was being monitored and controlled. He explained that messages would come through his management. Requirements for appearances, mandatory parties, expectations of behavior. When he expressed discomfort, things would shift. I'd say I didn't want to attend certain events, and suddenly my schedule would be rearranged without my input. I was a teenager. I didn't know I could say no and mean it. He said this didn't happen once or twice. It became his normal. Diddy and his circle didn't have to threaten directly. They controlled access, studio time, producers, collaborations, media coverage. As a kid, I didn't understand the system. I just knew I had to play by their rules, or my dream would disappear. Justin testified about one specific instance when he was 17. and had begun to pull away from certain industry gatherings. I started making excuses, saying I was too busy. Then suddenly, negative stories appeared online. Rumors about attitude problems, being difficult to work with. I was portrayed as ungrateful. The narrative shifted so fast it made my head spin. He said it was psychological manipulation of a minor. You start to doubt yourself. You're a teenager. Being told by powerful adults that this is normal, this is how the industry works. You don't have the life experience to recognize what's happening. Justin told the court he knew other young artists going through similar things. Some of them are still silent. Some of them never made it because they said no earlier than I did. Some of them are carrying even heavier burdens than mine. Then he turned toward Diddy and said plainly, "You didn't just discover young talent. You controlled our lives," and everyone understood the weight of what he meant. Justin didn't stop at his personal experience. He explained how the manipulation extended beyond him. It wasn't just me. It was a system. Young artists would be discovered, brought into the circle, made dependent, then controlled. The ones who played along got support. The ones who resisted got blackballed or worse. Justin said he once witnessed a meeting in 2013 where Diddy and several executives discussed a promising young artist who had started to push back. They weren't talking about his music anymore. They were strategizing how to humble him. I realized then that careers weren't just made in that room. They were also destroyed. He described moments where he watched other young artists being introduced at industry events, seeing the same pattern, the same isolation tactics, the same grooming process. I saw myself in them, but I felt powerless to warn them. I was still trapped in the same system. Justin testified that one reason he stayed silent so long was because he feared no one would believe a teenager over established industry powers. Then, I feared what would happen to everything I'd built. Eventually, I feared what people would think of me for not speaking sooner. He said the breaking point wasn't fear, it was responsibility. I realized that if I didn't speak now, other kids would continue experiencing what I did. My silence was protecting a system that hurts children. I couldn't live with that anymore, he told the court. He reached out to investigators himself after watching earlier testimony. I told them, I need to speak. I was 15. People need to know what happens to kids in this industry. He looked at the jury. I wasn't just manipulated. I was a child, being controlled by adults who knew exactly what they were doing. Then he looked at Diddy again, this time with clear eyes. And you knew I was 15. Justin closed his eyes for a moment before speaking again, as if preparing to relive something he had fought to forget. When the prosecution asked if there was evidence, I hesitated, he said slowly. But then I provided my old laptop, the original. Messages were still there, buried in old files I'd been too afraid to delete, but too afraid to look at. He described the prosecutor's reactions upon reviewing the materials. They asked if I understood what I was showing them. I said yes. Now I do. As an adult, I can finally see what I couldn't see as a child. Justin's voice cracked for the first time. He looked down, collecting himself, then continued, I was 15. I couldn't consent to any of it. I couldn't understand what was happening, but they recorded it anyway. They used it anyway. They treated me like an adult when I was still a child. Justin's voice dropped to a quieter, more reflective tone. I stayed quiet for over a decade. I convinced myself it wasn't that bad, or that it happened to everyone trying to make it. But then I started hearing other testimonies in this case. I recognized the patterns, the methods, the same techniques that were used on me when I was just a kid. He described how his perception shifted as he matured. As a teenager, you don't have the context to understand manipulation. You think the adults around you have your best interests at heart. It's only when you become an adult yourself that you look back and recognize how vulnerable you really were. He said the first time he heard about the recordings being discussed in court, he recognized the pattern immediately. Then I got a call from someone still inside that world. They said, "Justin, they have videos from when you were starting out. They might come up in court. You should be prepared." That's when I realized this wasn't just about my memories anymore. There was evidence. The prosecutor asked Justin how that call made him feel. He closed his eyes briefly before answering. Violated all over again. I was 15 in those videos. A child. The idea that these recordings had been kept all these years, passed around, discussed. I felt sick. I felt like my childhood was never really mine. He described feeling like his past was finally catching up. I didn't even know how much they had documented, but I knew I couldn't run from this anymore. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every kid who dreams of making music. Justin's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the glass of water on the stand. The courtroom remained absolutely silent as he collected himself. What people don't understand is that when you're 15 and suddenly thrust into this adult world, you have no reference point for what's normal. When people you've idolized your whole life tell you something is just how things work, you believe them. You don't question it. You just try to survive it. Justin said he spent sleepless nights thinking about his responsibility. The parties, the control, the loss of autonomy, the systematic way young talent was processed through a machine that took more than it gave. It wasn't just my story. It's a pattern that continues today with new young artists. I see these kids, 16, 17 years old, being mentored by the same people, going to the same types of events. And I recognize the look in their eyes because I had it too. One juror wiped away tears as Justin continued. I've tried to warn some of them privately. I've tried to create distance between young artists and certain industry figures. But the system is bigger than any one person. It needs to be exposed from the inside. He said the breaking point wasn't fear. It was clarity. I realized that my voice now could protect someone else's child. If I stayed silent, the cycle would continue. Kids shouldn't have to navigate what I did at 15. No Grammy, no world tour, no amount of fame is worth what happens behind those closed doors. The prosecutor asked if he was concerned about the potential impact on his career. Of course I am, Justin admitted. I'm not naive. There are powerful people who want me to stay quiet. There are consequences for speaking out, but there are worse consequences for staying silent. He told the court he volunteered his testimony without being subpoenaed. I told them, I'm ready. The truth matters more than my comfort or my image. I've built a life and career despite what happened, not because of it. If I lose opportunities because I'm speaking the truth, then those weren't opportunities worth having. He looked at the jury, making eye contact with each member. I wasn't just a witness. I was a child who couldn't protect himself then, but can speak up now. I was a 15-year-old boy with a dream who trusted the wrong people. That boy deserves justice. Then he looked at Diddy again, this time with the confidence of the adult he'd become. His voice didn't waver as he said, "And you knew exactly what you were doing to a 15-year-old boy? You knew I was too young to be in those environments. You knew I was too young to understand what was happening. You knew, and you did it anyway." For his final statement, the judge allowed Justin to speak directly to Diddy. He stood from the witness chair, walked a few feet closer, and looked him in the eye. The courtroom fell into a hush so complete You could hear the air conditioning humming overhead. "You built an empire using people like me," he began, his voice stronger now, steadied by purpose. "You called it mentorship. You called it opportunity. You called it the business. But all you built was exploitation. You took children with talent and dreams and taught them that their value was conditional on their compliance." Diddy didn't respond. He sat there with his head bowed, his lawyer frantically writing notes. The defense team appeared to be in disarray, passing messages and whispering urgently. Justin stood tall, transformed from the uncertain young man who had entered hours earlier. "I saw what you did to other young artists. I experienced what you did to me. I heard the things you said when you thought we didn't understand. You treated children like commodities, like investments to be controlled rather than young people, to be protected." The prosecutor remained seated, allowing this unplanned moment to unfold. The jury couldn't take their eyes off Justin, many leaning forward in their seats. "You surrounded yourself with people who enabled this behavior. Managers who should have protected us, but instead delivered us to you. Security who should have kept us safe, but instead kept us contained. Parents who trusted the wrong people with their children's futures." Then Justin pulled something from his pocket. An old backstage pass, laminated but worn at the edges. "This was me at 15, the first time I met you. That's the kid I'm speaking for today." He held it up to the court. "I kept this as a reminder of where I came from, but now I see it differently. I see it as evidence of a system that failed to protect me." He placed the pass on the evidence table with deliberate care. "I was a child who loved music. That's all. I wasn't asking to be introduced to adult situations. I wasn't asking to be recorded without my knowledge. I wasn't asking to be manipulated. I was asking for guidance in an industry I didn't understand." Justin turned to the jury, making a slow, deliberate pivot. "If you think this is just about parties or me or the music industry, you're not seeing the whole picture. This is about protecting children in an adult world. This is about systems that enable exploitation. This is about powerful people knowing they can get away with it because their victims are too young, too intimidated, or too dependent to speak up. And if we don't confront it, it will keep happening." Then he faced Diddy one last time. "You once said, 'Can't stop, won't stop.' Well, today, the exploitation stops. Not just for me, for every kid who comes after me." He walked back to the stand, picked up his things, and exited the courtroom without looking back. And Diddy? He collapsed forward, head in his hands, shoulders shaking with what appeared to be sobs. His legal team surrounded him, but the image was captured by courtroom artists and would become the defining visual of the trial, because for the first time in decades, he was facing the human cost of his actions. When Justin stepped down from the witness stand, he didn't look like a pop star. He looked like someone who had finally released a burden carried since childhood. The courtroom remained silent, processing the weight of his words. Even the judge appeared moved, removing his glasses and pinching the bridge of his nose before proceeding. Several jurors wiped tears from their eyes. The prosecutor closed her folder slowly, clearly understanding no further questions were necessary. Justin didn't speak to the press when he exited. He didn't wave, didn't perform. He walked out the front of the courthouse with his head held high, but his face showed the emotional toll of revisiting trauma carried since he was 15. Security had to clear a path through the gathered media, who for once seemed subdued, the usual shouted questions replaced by a respectful silence. When asked later by reporters if he regretted coming forward, he reportedly responded, "The only regret is not speaking sooner." But 15-year-olds shouldn't have to be that brave. That's what adults are supposed to be for. But outside the courtroom, the world was already reacting. The entertainment industry went into crisis mode. Talent agencies specializing in young performers called emergency meetings. Record labels issued statements about strengthening youth protection policies. Former child stars, who had once remained silent, were now considering their own truths. Behind closed doors, youth advocacy groups mobilized. Lawmakers began drafting legislation to strengthen protections for minors in entertainment. Lawyers representing current young performers reviewed contracts and working conditions. Industry veterans who had looked the other way for decades were finding themselves facing uncomfortable questions about what they knew and when they knew it. A social media storm erupted within hours. The hashtag #FreeYourTwo began trending, with thousands sharing their own stories of vulnerability and exploitation. Parents of aspiring young artists publicly questioned the safeguards in place for their children. Talent shows featuring young contestants found themselves under new scrutiny. Old interviews resurfaced, showing a teenage Justin looking uncomfortable when certain subjects arose. Early performances where his youth was painfully apparent, next to the adults controlling his career. Photos of young Justin at industry events where, in retrospect, he clearly didn't belong. And most disturbingly, the pattern repeated with other young artists who came after him. The same mentors, the same parties, the same sudden behavioral changes noted by fans. Behavioral analysts appeared on news programs pointing out signs of distress in archival footage that had been dismissed at the time as teenage attitude or the pressures of fame. Child psychologists discussed the unique vulnerability of adolescence in adult-dominated industries. The conversation had permanently shifted. Fans weren't just shocked. They were protective. Protective of the 15-year-old boy they now realized had been navigating an adult world without adequate safeguards. Protective of other young performers still in the industry, and furious that the systems meant to protect minors had failed so completely for so long. But Justin didn't retreat after his testimony. The day after court, he posted a simple message online, a photo of himself at 15 with the caption, "To every kid with a dream, your talent doesn't mean you have to accept mistreatment. I didn't know that then. I'm making sure you know it now." No hashtags, no promotions, just that. The response was overwhelming. Millions of supportive messages, thousands of parents thanking him, and perhaps most significantly, current young performers expressing gratitude for making their path safer. "You're changing things for us," one wrote. "Thank you for your courage." Major artists began canceling collaborations with producers and executives implicated in the testimony. Music awards shows announced new ethics committees. Streaming platforms removed certain artists pending investigation. The industry was self-correcting in real time. Meanwhile, back inside the court, Diddy remained visibly shaken. Witnesses described him as distracted, constantly whispering to his legal team, occasionally putting his head in his hands. Court reporters noted he no longer made eye contact with the jury. What Justin's testimony had done wasn't just damage Diddy's defense. It had humanized the consequences of exploitation by putting a face, a 15-year-old face, on what had previously been discussed in abstract terms. Experts say more safeguards for minors in entertainment would likely result from this testimony. Child labor laws in entertainment, which have long contained loopholes and exceptions, were already being revisited by state legislators. The court sealed certain evidence involving minors, but according to insiders, the existence of this material alone could prompt industry-wide reforms. And Justin, he didn't immediately return to music. He declined interviews about the case. He canceled some appearances, but he wasn't hiding. Sources close to him said he was focusing on healing and advocacy, meeting privately with organizations dedicated to protecting children in entertainment. One friend told Entertainment Weekly anonymously, "He's found purpose in protecting others that he wishes someone had found for him. This isn't the end of his story. It's the beginning of his legacy." Before court adjourned that day, the judge made a statement that resonated throughout the legal and entertainment communities. What we heard today transcends this courtroom. It speaks to our collective responsibility to protect children, regardless of their talent or potential. No industry is exempt from this most basic moral obligation. The final image wasn't of Diddy's breakdown. It wasn't even of Justin's brave testimony. It was of parents across the country having difficult but necessary conversations with their children about boundaries, consent, and the courage to speak up. And in those conversations, the era of silence was truly ending. Thank you for watching this breaking coverage. If you found this report informative, please like and subscribe to support our ongoing coverage of this landmark case. Your engagement helps us continue to shine a light on important stories that might otherwise remain in the shadows.